Jingme Pamso Jala Surande, Gonje Toban Power Shinjilo, Gonje Toban Power Shinjilo, Gonje Toban Power Shinjilo, Wushang Shen.
The supreme, profound, and sublime Dharma is difficult to encounter in a billion years, but now I have been fortunate enough to have seen it, heard it, received it, and kept it. I vow to attain the true meaning of the Tathagata.
Gerlung Koka Laka Yerashon Namlar Kurtape, Pachin Tarkia Nyarvar Tong Stijan Muni Chutsar Tap Wochong Slobmen Jiktin Ba Mangbur Kurab Tapa Yi Leki Lingen Dormatak Leki Lingen Dormato Stirmu Nyari Dungurum Yong Gavjon Trupe Jant Mod Nangakar Narman Hormed Nyong Chemmed Kimbe Rapshon Lar Mope Ngarton Muchogu Dinam Kipi Sishang Sopak Sokyang Mermodna Chapter Gela Jorva Yi Rapshon Samar Muchogu Dope Mei Semter de Sami Tsachum Gujirtian Maram Nirde Shirni Shirshina Slarian Papi Chart Tsat Ganjig Loglam Jigirtian Mugdan Slarian Lamni Division Gavjon Sutra Rarnayam, Nirkub Yindiam Tarsur Chet, Ganjig Savdir and Yerva Nar, Gandan near the Yarlamjan, Gavjon Sutra Junjig Yang, Rang, Marang, Larian, Super Yer, Huernan Jiktan Segi, no the Chagyan Rantang Chetnam to, Shangno Chagmet Pansok Yang, Day Sernun Randa Met, Gavjon Sutra Sernchir Chiki Yang, Tomi Nimjong. Yondan ter Shiab Chagji Kimbai Yondan Namji Janda Met Rapshon Namji Yarai Ginzan Shirb Tambar Per Yondan Bamtan Kimbai Tamba Jonzer Permani Rapshon Sernchir Tachit Yang Chope Demji Hormet Ton Stombe Tei Yerhnger Bel Hadan Mei Sigtabkar Devshir Janla Namkriti Gendam Kumchok Madmavsha Tsendi Vakchag Nangkum Gi Shimi Gamje Vlabrab Shit Linger Yoksum Magili Jikten Hami Saun Jum Nganson Nexum Stone Se Karwa Tonshir Ngaso Met Rapshon Namla Tashin Kirndib Nipa Maxober Tagda Ngak Nipa Pong Gendan Show Gendon Kumchok Mudmusha Rapshon Mopen Nipar Nam Nirda Tangwa Yiki Shak Delap Timbangan Semji Maung or Dugnon Shaprasha.
First of all, before the actual class, I would like to ask everyone to chant the mani together, the mantra of Avalokiteshvara. The reason behind it is that, in fact, this year is rather a very special year. Because of the pandemic, there are over 500,000 people have lost their lives. On top of that, there are other situations such as the locusts, pestilence, flooding, all kinds of things. Looking at everything that's happening globally, let it be famine, war, illness, and poverty, all kinds of negative things had happened. And I think within our Sangha, we probably don't have a clear sense of that. But in the cities, in fact, I think they really experienced this year and felt that this is a very special, very different year than previous times. from certain angles, there are countries which had put the epidemic under control and everything started to recover. And however, there are countries that are currently still suffering from the epidemic. Therefore, all of us should wholeheartedly supplicate to Avalokiteshvara, wishing for all the ones who are alive, wish them happiness and safety and health, and for the ones who already passed away, may they receive the merit and ultimately being reborn in pure land. Let's chant together then. Now let's then continue with the class on Sutra on praising the noble qualities of the Sangha. In fact, slandering the monastic, the Sangha, in fact, the result of which would be quite severe. Previously, we've already learned that if one were to slander and gossip about the monastics, they won't be able to see the face of Tathagata, and also would destroy other people's virtuous roots. That indeed is true. So we all have to pay attention to our speech. If we were to destroy the stupa, in fact, we will be reborn in the hell realm and probably won't be able to get liberated for many kalpas. But such action won't create grave consequences for others or destruction to others. However, if we were to slander bodhisattva, sangha, monastic, that kind of result would be quite horrifying and would also, on top of that, destroy or harm immeasurable sentient beings as well. Therefore, the wise ones should put that into contemplation. This is quite important. The wise ones would know how to differentiate, would know how to choose the right from the wrong, and just as the wise ones in this world, they won't violate the law. Whatever happens, they won't do things that would violate the law. And wise practitioners, similarly, they would rather choose to die in this lifetime and not making such severe negative karma. So now let's move to the 32nd stanza, where it says that there was a bhikshu whose name is Kokaliya, Bhikshu Kokailia. This story, in fact, is included in Vinaya Sutra as well as in Agama Sutra. I think this story is very famous, very well known. People who studied Vinaya probably all know, are quite aware of this story. Once he foul-mouthed the Sangha. In fact, he has lots of stories. Sometimes he slanders the Sangha, including to Madhgalyayana, Shariputra, and so on. And for such reason, he then was reborn into the hell realm of stone mill, or the great lotus hell realm, where his tongue was plowed into thousands and tens of thousands of pieces by the plow ox, and experienced such great suffering in the hell realm. The reason that he was using language, using speech to slander the reason he experienced such kind of suffering is because he used to slander the Sangha with his speech. Especially according to the Sutra, it says that there is a hell realm that is plowing the tongue hell realm. The tongue is just like the field. The field of crops, and then because of the karma of sentient beings, that the tongue becomes really big and vast. So in this hell realm, for thousands of years, the tongue will be plowed, and people would suffer from such kind of pain. And this kind of karmic consequences is in fact very difficult for us to even imagine. There are people, while they were alive, they were quite eloquent. They know, they're very good at talking. Therefore, they would create lots of negative karma because they're eloquent and makes great influence to others. The Bhikshu Kokailia at the time, in fact, he has such eloquence and attracted many people to listen to him. Once Shariputra and Madhgalyayana went on a field trip, but on the way back, rain started pouring down. They had no way to go back. Therefore, two of them found a cave and then stayed overnight in that cave. However, they had no idea that at the very back of the cave, very much at the inner part of the cave, there was a herdswoman was also living there. But the two bhikshus did not know that. And because Shariputra is so magnificent in his presence, the woman then had lots of greed towards him, and she had some impure action at the time, but had nothing to do directly with the two bhikshus. The second day, after two of them came out of the cave, the two bhikshus came out of the cave, Kokailia, who has this special ability, of observing, because of his observance, he saw that he saw the woman also coming out and knew that she did something impure, and for that reason, he started to accuse Shariputra and Madhgalyayana had sexual misconduct in the cave, and he spreaded that in crowds with anger. Lots of Sangha tried to convince him not to talk about that, not to spread such such kind of speech, because the two venerables, in fact, are quite pure. But Kokhalya did not listen to them at all. Rather, he generated even more aggression and spread it in such speech even wider. Madhgalayana and Shariputra, while they were giving the teaching, in fact, one of them already attained the fruition of non-return, and then was born into the celestial realm. One of the celestial beings in the celestial realm heard about the slandering from the bhikshu Kokhalya, and he himself went to the Sangha and tried to warn him not to do so. And Kokhalya said that since you're already then born in celestial realm, you've already attained this you've already attained this non-return fruition. Why are you here? And he said that I'm here to warn you. You'd better not to slander the two venerables, that is Madhgalayana and Shariputra. But Kokhalya didn't listen to him and continuously to slander the two venerables. And later on his body, all the way from head to toes, he started to have obsessed with pus within. At first, they were the size of peas, and then slowly they grow to be the size of papaya. And even the Buddha later tried to warn him, saying he shouldn't do that anymore. The Buddha tried to stop him for 3 times. He didn't listen. And slowly his body degenerated much, much faster, and his body would would burn even inside the water, and he died from he died from the pain of being burned alive. And then after he died, he was born into the great lotus hell realm, and then to the hell realm of pulling the tongue and experienced the immeasurable amount of pain. The story was told by Phuntsok Rinpoche as well. He said that Toga Rinpoche often used this story to warn people not to slander the Sangha. So this story of Kokhalya Bhikshu is a story that is often taught by both the Toga Rinpoche as well as the Phuntsok Rinpoche. On one hand, because Kokhalya was very eloquent, he was very influential. On the other hand, there are people who seems to be very capable, and they're really good at giving speech, and very eloquent, very convincing. And there are people, of course, who are, on the other hand, there are people who are like Chulapanta, the very slow bhikshu that we talked about yesterday. Even though he may have seen some actions, but he won't slander others and spread those in front of others or gossip those around. So it is good to be smart, but if you're smart but not really on the right way, then maybe that kind of smartness or that kind of wisdom is rather used on the wrong way and creating more negative karmas than the others. So if one were to use a foul language to slander the Sangha or the monastics, such kind of negative fruition will be experienced by himself. This is in fact quite horrifying. Next one, then it says that there are also the disciples of Kashyapa who slandered immeasurable worldly beings.
迦叶尊者的一些这个弟子的话，那就是他有汇报了这个很多很多的，他整理无量的话，那可能
In fact, over here it says that a disciple of Kashyapa who slandered many lay practitioners or many worldly people, not necessarily mundane, not necessarily ordained monastic. During the time of the Buddha Kashyapa, there was a person who was very eloquent. He would give different nicknames, denigrate nicknames to the monastics, such as horsehead, oxhead, and so on. And then later he was reborn as a monster who has 18 kinds of heads. That story was taught before as well. With all these kinds of negative karma, he gave up the bodily form, the body that created negative karma, the inferior body, and then directly and maybe maybe born in other hell realms, and then later was born into the tongue-pulling hell realm, and then tongue-plowing hell realm, and suffered immeasurable pain. This kind of pain, this kind of suffering in the Buddha's Name Sutra, in fact, talked about a lot of the suffering in the tongue-plowing hell realm, such as there are men made of iron using iron weapon to plow. You born 1,000 times, die thousands of times, continuously feel that kind of pain. I have too much fillers in my language. It reminds me of someone I know who would use lots of fillers in while talking. This, and that.
地藏经里面啊，就是专门有一篇讲这个地狱的痛苦啊，就是
the Kshitigarbha Sutra, there's a chapter also talks extensively about the two hell realms. I think tomorrow I will give the teaching on, tomorrow or day after I will give the teaching on Kshitigarbha Sutra. Because right now there are so many calamities that are happening everywhere in this world, and with the aspiration of Kshitigarbha Bodhisattva, may him bestow world peace and health to everyone. I think this is quite necessary. On one hand, it is necessary to recall his merit. On the other, I think through the studying of Kshitigarbha Sutra with the power of the Bodhisattva, maybe we can turn such pessimistic, such difficult situation around. Of course, the worldly beings would use research and technology and so on to turn things around. They have their methods, but other than those methods, we also have methods such as supplication, such as praying for the Bodhisattva's power and blessings to transform, to turn around the sentient being's fate. Maybe we'll learn the Kshitigarbha Sutra together. I think it would be really beneficial. This year, I've been studying as well as translating a few sutras. So I think from the day after, we will start studying the Kshitigarbha Sutra. Anyhow, we were talking about during the time of Buddha Kashyapa, there were people also who slandered others and then fell into, or was reborn into the hell realm of taking the tongue out, and that was lots of pain to just think about, which means then if the object of slandering is not arhats or noble beings, if they're even just the worldly beings, then that kind of suffering, that kind of frustration could also be difficult to endure. I remembered that Lala Chukchu Rinpoche, in the commentary on the aspiration of being reborn in Sukhavati, he said that he explicitly talked about the faults of speech, and lots of them were really wonderful to study. The great masters, the previous masters, they really put lots of attention to watch their body, speech, and mind. We wear masks because we are afraid of the pandemic. At the same time, I think in order to, similarly, if we don't want to create negative karma, we should watch our speech. For people with right mindfulness, after receiving the Pitha instructions, they would pay close attention. When people are not afflicted, maybe the weather is good and the mood is good, and they can become a real practitioner. But when the weather is not good, health is not good, mood is not good, and other obstacles all adds up together, then all the practice, all the insights and right mindfulness are completely disappeared. So that's how mundane beings are. Anyhow, in whichever way circumstances are, we should use right mindfulness to guard our body, speech, and mind. And then the 34th says that if a Shramana slanders others with anger, causes immeasurable negative karma of speech, then don't even mention about the white-clothed practitioner or white-clothed mundane being without any precept. By slandering the Sangha, how can they ever be freed from being reborn in the lower realms? There are Shramanas or the monastics with great anger or in bad mood, they would slander others. The frustration is in fact quite severe. Then the lay practitioners who never received the precept or never received the monastic precepts, if they were to slander others, then that kind of negative frustration would be extremely severe. Monastics, if they were to slander others, the negative frustration is quite horrifying as well. According to a Shastra, that it was according to a Shastra that is collected around the later Han Dynasty, the differentiation on merit Shastra, it talks quite a bit of the stories from different disciples of the Buddha, and one of which talked about there was one Bhikshu Bodhisattva went to beg for alms in the city, and a beautiful woman saw this Bodhisattva, and she thought how very dignified and majestic person he is. If I were to sit with him, then I will be able to generate a great bodhicitta. Maybe that bhikshu understood, and maybe that bodhisattva knew that at the time, so he went and sat with her. However, she then wanted more, and it was not enough. And she thought if he were to touch me, I would generate the supreme bodhicitta. And so the bodhisattva started to get closer to her and slowly give her teachings on the emptiness of the human body. That is, the eyes do not exist, the ear do not exist, just as how it happened in the Sutra taught to the Matangi's daughter. That sutra is very short. It is already in the Chinese Tripitaka, but not in the Tibetan Tripitaka. Therefore, I translated into the Tibetan. I used to translate lots of Tibetan language into Chinese, but I think maybe the Chinese don't need it anymore because not many people would read it. They don't put it into great importance. I think maybe people likes the new things more than the old. Therefore, I didn't. Therefore, I translated the ones in that is included in the Tibetan language. Therefore, then I translated the ones that's not in the Tibetan language into Tibetan language. I know that there is an extensive teaching already within the Tibetan language into the Tibetan Tripitaka. However, whichever way people read it or not, from last year, I started to spend more time in translating from Chinese into Tibetan. My translation may not be very good and may not be very bad either. In fact, you have to understand both language in depth in order to be a good translator. Especially, you have to have a certain invested energy in the field. Therefore, I think about 99% of the teaching I will be able to translate it. According to the sutra taught to Matangi's daughter, it says that, what do you like about Ananda? Do you like the ears, eyes, nose, tongue? And then, of course, at the end, after observing all of those, she attained the noble fruition. And this bodhisattva similarly taught that woman about the non-existent nature, and then that beautiful woman also attained Shropatana fruition. Ananda at the time went to the Buddha because Ananda was the attendant, and the attendant in front of Buddha also likes to tell on people in front of Buddha. Maybe that's the tendency of all attendants. So maybe that's why people don't like the teacher's attendance. Anyhow, when he told the Buddha, so-and-so bhikshu at so-and-so place did so-and-so things, at the time this bodhisattva bhikshu manifested from nowhere in the sky, and at that time Ananda recognized it was his impure perception and started to make his confession. Lots of bodhisattvas' stories are just like fairy tales. Maybe sometimes they would manifest their miraculous powers, which is quite interesting. Anyhow, the next one, then it says that, therefore, the wise ones should not slander or smear even the materialistic existence, such as grass, wood, bricks, shingles, and so on. If one should not even slander those material existence, don't even mention about the sentient beings, especially the pure monastics who practice renunciation and practice virtuous deeds. There are people who has great anger when they couldn't light the engine, and they would get really angry, get really upset, and when they don't drive, when they're driving on the road, but he couldn't drive very fast in the traffic jam, he had to put brakes. and they would step on brakes really harshly. So for the ones with great anger, they would lash out their anger on objects. But it says that you should not even, according to a sutra, it says that you should not even slander the firewoods with anger. Don't even mention about the sentient beings with mind. Therefore, definitely not to slander the sentient beings. In the ornament of Mahayana Sutra Shastra, I think I quoted from it before. It says that in fact, the fault of mind is in fact the most horrifying. It is the most inferior to the forms, such as to the objects such as lamp or doors or any kind of things, objects without life, without sentience. You should not treat them with anger. You should not slander them or create doubts. Then why would, if you do not even have those kinds of inferior minds towards those objects, how can you have those inferior minds towards the Dharma? Therefore, why don't you just let it go for now? This would be the best. It won't create any negative karma. Ponsukar Rinpoche used to quote from it quite often. There's another explanation about the form, that is, our mind and our nature can be quite inferior. We don't really know many things. We don't even understand everything about the phenomena. Don't even mention about the most profound, genuine Dharma. Therefore, it is best not to make any criticism or any comments on this. Shakespeare once said that do not slander the things that you do not understand, otherwise you may have to use your life to make up the mistakes you've made before. Therefore, if we should not have anger and aggression towards objects, towards all phenomena, then the lay practitioners, when facing the monastics who practice on the renunciation and practice virtuous deeds, it is even more important that you do not slander them. It's quite important to keep your actions very pure. On the next stanza, then it says that there are some monastics and practitioners, even if their actions are not according to the Dharma, but they could be very temporary, not permanent. And then it says that even if some monastics break their vow, break the shila, that is, shila is in Sanskrit, if they were to break their precepts because of a great desire that is burning in their mind. Shila also has the meaning of cooling. If a monastic, because of desire that is burning in his mind and defiled the pure precepts, the precepts that could bring cool and calmness, that monastic would confess very soon while knowing he had made a mistake. And then he will return back to the pure Sangha group. There was a beautiful woman, her name was Amrapali, and later she became the concubine of King Bimbisara. Once he went to see the Buddha, at the time Nanda had not attained realization yet, and Nanda then had desire towards her. And then Amrapali went directly to the Buddha and told on him and saying that how could your Sangha have such kind of actions? I won't tell you what he did, but you should know that he was not pure. Though Nanda did not break the root vow, but some actions was not so pure. Amrapali doesn't like Nanda, and she told on him. In fact, wanted to test on the Buddha, and that was what she did. And Buddha said that, in fact, Nanda, though has desire and this deluded mind, but soon he would attain the supreme fruition, and not going to be a great delusion that is irreversible. So the Buddha then, after coming back to the Sangha, and he berated Nanda, and Nanda felt great shame, because Nanda couldn't control his desire when he was in the celestial realm or in the human realm, and when he saw the concubine, he also had desire. But then after he generated a genuine confession and regret, that's when he attained fruition. So there are monastics who probably had then defiled the pure precept because of afflictions, but before death, some of those could be recovered. I'm not sure what it is like in mainland area right now, the monastics in mainland right now, but in Tibet, in fact, it is not very optimistic, I have to say. There are lots of young monastics got derobed, and after they got derobed, 90% of them, they felt really regrettable. They felt that they made the most stupid decision in their life. Sometimes I would meet the Dharma practitioners, or maybe people I knew before. They made their mistakes basically because of their juvenile ideas or their afflictions, but after they got derobed and become lay practitioner, I think 90% and over of them felt really regrettable. They used to be very pure. There's no pressure in life, and they felt happy in every aspect, but after getting derobed, they had to form a family, and they had lots of pressure. They couldn't even find a girlfriend, and they felt suffering quite a bit. Sometimes because of the pressure. In fact, the pressure for the monastics and the lay practitioners are extremely different. I often think to myself, after the pandemic this year, I think many monastics probably had no idea what happened. They would feel like, well, what happened? There's something happened this year. But lots of the lay practitioners, after this pandemic, they would have great pressure and they would worry a lot. There's a lot of changes in their lives. In fact, monastics, I think there are some changes. For example, in our shops over here, they said that 1 month of income is similar to the half year's income this year. I think the restaurants or hotels and so on, because there's really no tourism, if the pandemic continues to the end of year or even next year, or if there's a second wave, I think it's going to create some changes to the monastic as well. But just changes in terms of livelihood, in terms of life or lifestyle, but the majority of it is not going to change. The monastics who had already devoided desire, they are renunciates. In order to study the genuine Dharma, they've already given up on family, on their different lifestyle, on the relationship, on job, and all of those things that mundane beings grasp onto greatly. And the renunciates would go to the secluded mountains and practice. For this reason, I think in terms of the lifestyle and so on, it's not going to make lots of difference for the renunciates, for the monastics. And I think that is quite important to, I think that's reasonable to understand. For the lay practitioners, for the monastics, maybe they made some temporary mistake, but from the absolute view or in general, according to Bodhisattva precepts or the Tantrayana precepts and the Pratimoksha precepts and so on, there are different ways and different rules of making confession, and after they confess, they can still come back to the group of Sangha. And over here, the next one then says that if someone lost their way, since they still have eyes, they can still find the road. Nowadays, people completely rely on GPS. People would turn on their GPS and would say that, now you have to look at the road, and I'll keep my GPS open as well. Just like that, as people lost halfway on the path, and they can still find a way back. So they can then continue on the right path after. Similarly, even if a bhikshu violated some of the precepts that's made by the world-honored one, but it is temporary and it can be recovered. Over here, the Shramana and the Bhikshu, they're in fact the same. They're the same group of people. They're all the monastics. So the monastics, though maybe temporarily violated the precepts that's made by the world-honored one, but that is really just a temporary. Eventually, they will be able to recover by practicing as well as making confession. And there are people in later of their years who will be able to reawake or coming back to their original path. Jiqian's translation on Sutra, where it says that a person who had one moment of virtuous thought of practicing on the path, in fact, to surpass the devious deeds that's practiced in 10,000, 100,000 of kalpas. But that really depends on if one could generate a genuine mind of confession, a genuine mind of searching for the right path. And once you have that kind of mind, you will have opportunity to confess. I think nowadays it's quite important to bring into our attention. There are lots of monastics in Tibet. Once they get derobed, it's quite a shame to say them. Not only they change their identity, they change their mind completely as well. they became even more vicious than the worldly beings. They would kill and steal and gambling and alcohol. They practice all kinds of devious actions. Of course, that is a very small amount of people, and this kind of things do happen. But you should understand that by conducting your actions like such would lead to the three lower realms and merely any opportunity to be liberated anymore. When the wind of karma blows, there are monastics who would break their vows to derobe and so on. At the beginning of the Kalpa, when the Buddha was still in this world, there were monastics like such as well. So it is then in some ways normal to see it in the degenerated age. But even if it happens, you should think that though the precepts and the identity had changed after derobe, though you used to wear red robes and now you're wearing the white clothing of lay practitioner, but if your mind is still virtuous, if your actions still virtuous, then such kind of mistake, in fact, is not so grave. You still have opportunities to get liberated. There are people who felt quite regrettable in a short period of time. They used to be a majestic monastic in the monastic group, but now they're lay practitioners. They would feel so ashamed, and there are people, the family would feel really happy and rejoice once they get derobed. But it's very different. And there are people who would feel that they've changed their intention from before, and they would have a different view about the person who got derobed, and even a sense of contamination, whichever way it is. If you don't have a sense of shame, then even if the Buddha is standing right in front of you, there's nothing that you can do. There are the monastics, after they got derobed, they become this vicious kind of person. They would kill, they would steal, they would conduct sexual misconduct and lie, and they rejected the karma, they rejected the setting of karma, the right view of karma, even slander it. In this way, they become even more horrible than the mundane beings, because they've studied Sutra and Shastras, and therefore their slandering is even worse than the mundane beings, because they know how to use the stories and examples, of course, in the wrong way. So this kind of person is the most scary and the most pitiful of all. And then next one, it says that just as a person who fell on the ground, because that person still have the 2 feet, therefore he can stand up really quickly. Maybe if one slips down and fell down and so on, they can stand up quickly. But of course, unless if you're overweight, then it will be difficult for you to stand up. There are people who's not so overweight, rather quite light. They're the ones who don't practice, who don't exercise at all, and then they take a lot of effort, and they have to take a lot of effort to stand up. Maybe because they eat too much and their body got too heavy, and this is not good. If you're gaining weight and getting heavier, then it is best to eat less, sleep less, and this is better. The lay practitioners, unlike the monastics, unlike lay practitioners, since you don't have too much pressure from life, you don't have to go to work and so on, you're only meditating all day long and chanting mantra. I think gaining weight is easy. Therefore, on one hand, you can prostrate every day. You can do things by yourself instead of asking others to do things for you. I heard there are people who are really lazy. They would not even reach for the remote controller for the television. Would wait for the bus to, instead of running for the bus that's about to depart, they would wait there for the next bus. Things like that. And there are people who are just very habitually lazy, and that's not good. So lay practitioner or monastic, I think it is quite important to exercise your body. On top of that, we need to exercise our mind. What does exercising our mind mean then? There are people who would say that I'm too old, I can just chant mantra, that's all I need to do. I think it's very easy to get Alzheimer this way because you're not exercising your mind. There are experts who then would ask people to go to the university at old age to remember to study a new language, and so in this way your mind would start getting exercise. If you only chant mantra without moving every day, I think it is not good either. For the ones who are more senior, maybe you can study Abhidharma or memorize some of those Buddhist logic words. When my mother was still alive, there was an old monastic. She said, my Kumo asked me to then study the Buddhist logic debate. Her age was very similar to my mother, and asked her, I asked her, why do you want to study Buddhist logic? And she said, my Kumo asked me to study logic. My mind is pretty good, so let it be Buddhist logic or Abhidharma. We should continue our study. Among the Khenpos and Khenmos, some of you would complain that you're getting a bit too old. You should teach a little bit simpler things. And from their expression, you can see that they're not very confident, and that's not good. Bhikshus, if they were to break their shila, their precept, though temporarily violated those precepts, but they would be able to mend it. View is quite important. View is more important. According to the 400 verses on Madhyamika, it says that one would rather to violate the shila than to violate the right view, because shila would lead to the higher realms, but right view lead to nirvana. And next verse is then another metaphor. It says that just as the golden container, though broken and shabby, it is still expensive. Golden containers such as plates, bowl, and so on, though maybe it's already broken and shabby, but the value, just like how the wooden container, on the other hand, even if it is perfect, but the value of it cannot be compared to the golden one. The perfect wooden container, in fact, has lots of differences in terms of value compared to the container that is made of gold.
金器跟那个什么，我们这个木土做的就是非常圆满的一个非常完整的一个器皿，这两个比较起来的话呢，
maybe the container is broken, the golden container is broken or shabby, but the value won't change, or the value is still much more expensive than the wooden one. And then it says that though the bhikshu who had break the precepts but the initial intention of ordination already surpassed the thousands and even tens of thousands of white-clothed lay practitioners in terms of their merit. In fact, the merit cannot be compared to the monastics. Maybe the lay practitioner is more supreme in terms of the academic or skills and things like such, but the renunciation and faith is completely different. According to Mahaprajna Paramita, there's a story that a person was completely drunk and walking wobbly to the Buddha and told the Buddha that he wants to become a monastic, and the Buddha told Ananda, now quickly shave off his hair. So Ananda, after shaving off his hair and to give him monastic robes to wear, he then woke up after getting sober, and he got so scared after noticing that his hair is gone, and he then threw out the monastic robe and went back. People didn't understand why the Buddha let a drunkard to get ordained, and the Buddha said that this particular person didn't even have a single thought of renunciation for hundreds of thousands of kalpas. Though for a very short period of time, because of drinking, because of intoxication, he finally had this temporary mind of getting renounced, ordained and become a renunciate. Therefore, I am helping him to plant this virtuous root. That's why I let him get ordained. Sometimes I think there are the short-term ordination, short-term renunciation, and this is in fact quite meritorious. There are celebrities who would shave off their hair and or use some material to hide the hair underneath the cover, and they can play the role of monastic. I think even so, by doing that, in fact, it is quite more meritorious. According to Mahaprajna Paramita Sutra, it says that there was a bhikshuni, Upalavarna. After she got ordained and she attained the realization of arhathood, and then she was then within a group of people of higher social status, and then there were beautiful women and people of great wealth and so on. And bhikshuni tried to convince them to get ordained. There are women within this group said, no, I can't do that. I'm so beautiful and so young, and after getting ordained, I would break the vow. And bhikshuni then told them, it's okay, you can break your vow and you can still get ordained. And they said, no, if I were to break the vow, then I would be reborn in hell realm. And bhikshuni said, it's okay. If you were to born in hell realm, then let it be. Why did she say that? It is because at the time she already gained the 6 kinds of transcendental power, and at the time she has the transcendental power of knowing people's previous lives. And she got to know that in the previous life she was a dancer, a performer. And once she performed a role of a monastic, and because of this virtuous deed, she later, during the Kashyapa Buddha's time, she got ordained and became a bhikshuni. But when she was a bhikshuni at the time, she was really arrogant and made lots of negative karma, and because of those negative karma, she was then reborn in the hell realm and suffered quite a bit in hell realm. And later on, because of all of these kinds of previous karma, she later finally was reborn in the time of Dharma teachings in Shakyamuni Buddha, and finally attained the fruition of arhathood. And then she said that if she had never played that role as a dancer, if she never became ordained bhikshuni during Kashyapa Buddha's time and break the vow, and now she would never attain arhathood and would probably still dwelling in samsara. So even as a bhikshuni, even as a bhikshu or a monastic who break the vow, in fact the merit is so much more than the lay practitioners. It is said that under the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha, and during the time of Shakyamuni Buddha's teachings, if someone even hold the appearance of a monastic, then during the time of the last Buddha of the good kalpa, they would for sure attain liberation. So I heard that recently they are quite odd. They would, they're probably just tourists. They would wear monastic robe, and during the lockdown, some people would wear the monastic clothing and put their hair in the hat, and then under such disguise they were able to come into the monastery. This is not to say that you should come into the monastery in this way. This is not really good. Of course, as a lay practitioner, it is best not to wear the monastic's clothing, especially in the Shudra, in the institute, in the monastery. It is the best to have very clear distinction between the monastic and the lay practitioner. When I was doing the translation of this text, I thought that it is best not to talk about this so extensively. Otherwise, if many people want to get ordained, then I would run into trouble because I can't really refuse that request. In the Sutra on the merits on ordination, it talks about if people want to get ordained, I cannot stop them. If I were to stop them, the faults are quite grave whatsoever. Anyhow, we do have rules in Larungar, especially now. If there are people who are too old or too young, they cannot really get ordained over here because it is a Shudra, it is a Buddhist institute, therefore there are rules. If it is for other monasteries and practice centers and so on, if you want to get ordained or plant a virtuous root, and if they agree, of course I have no other ways to stop you, but I think if you want to get ordained, it is best to fully get ordained, and lay practitioners should behave the same way, the way the lay practitioners should, and the monastic should behave the way monastic should. Otherwise, if you change back and forth from lay practitioner to a monastic, then it's not so good. You're wasting your life in different clothings, and this is not very helpful in a short life period. So if you don't have the favorable conditions, it is the best to just be a pure lay practitioner. Whenever the conditions permit, then you can get ordained and become monastic. For 41st stanza, and it says that the monastics, in fact, are capable to inherit the teachings of Tathagata during degenerated age. So it says that the monastics, in fact, they have that capacity to inherit the career, inherit the teaching of the Tathagata in the degenerated age. And this is a bit different than the lay practitioners. The lay practitioners, if they were to inherit millions of virtue, but the capacity of them to propagate Dharma in a short period of time is in fact quite difficult. It is completely relying on the Sangha to propagate the Dharma. That's what it is commonly known in the mainland. The staff member, in terms of lots of our volunteer staff member, we can see for lay practitioners, and though they really have the great intention to put great efforts, but because of different pressure, because of their life and so on, they would be called away by their family members. There are all different kinds of pressures. There are lots of lay practitioners who were excellent in their volunteer position, and if they really want to continue with that, I also agreed for them to get ordination, because as a lay practitioner to work as a staff member in the monastery, in fact, it is quite difficult for a long period of time. Similarly, I think 90% of people who propagated Dharma in the history, who propagated quite extensively, I think 90% of them are in fact monastics. We can see that in the history. There are lots of people who had great capacity, who had great blessings and majestic, and they're quite magnificent in terms of propagating the Dharma. Whatever country they're from, the Theravada or Tibetan or the mainland tradition, I think majority of them are in fact completely depending on the I think majority of them are depending on the capacity of monastics. So, of course, there are the ones such as Pamasambhava and different masters who are lay practitioners, but the majority of them are in fact monastics. I've met Master Ben Huan, who lived to 120 years. He held my hand at the time, told me that we're both monastics, and to propagate Dharma is in fact our family affair. He was very compassionate. He lived over 100 years, and at that time he was over 100 years old, and all he thinks of is to propagate Dharma, and that is our family affair. But for lay practitioners, I think to have this kind of mind is in fact indeed very difficult, and from this aspect it is definitely very important to praise the noble qualities of the monastics. I think I've taught for quite a long period of time, but because the content is a little more, therefore I need a bit more time. In whichever way, I think I taught a little bit shorter than Tsotrung Lodro Rinpoche. Khenpo Tsotrung Lodro, he sometimes would teach for over 2 hours. So if you don't believe me, you can then make a comparison of our lecturing time. The 42nd one then says that even for the monastics who had violated the precept, if you were to make offering to them, even if you were to make an offering to them, then you will receive the merit that is in tens of millions of fold. There are monastics who violated their precepts, but if you were to make offering to them, such as the ones who look quite inferior, who has this mad actions and behavior and so on. But even for these kind of monastics, if you were to make offering to them, the merit is immeasurable. Because the great compassionate Buddha in different sutras had praised the Sangha, let it be the ones from celestial realm or human realm, in fact, all revere. All should revere the Sangha. The ones who break or violated their vow, can they still stay with the Sangha group? In fact, they shouldn't. They have to then be expelled. They can no longer be in the Sangha group. However, the kings or ministers, they cannot beat them up. To be expelled from the Sangha, in fact, is that rule had been made by the Buddha. The bhikshus who violated precept cannot stay with the pure Sangha anymore. This is not allowed. But even such kind of bhikshu still has its own merit and can receive offering from the lay practitioners. It is still proper for them to receive offerings. According to the 10 chakras of Kshitigarbha Sutra, it has lots of metaphors, such as the king of the ox had died, but the gall is still quite valuable, and so on. And then in the 10 chakra of Kshitigarbha Sutra, there's a teaching that is quoted also by the Shastra of praising precepts. It then says that the gardenia flower, though wilted, is still more fragrant than all the other flowers. So for a bhikshu whose evil actions may have already violated the precept, but he himself is still more supreme than all the other non-practitioners. Gardenia is a very fragrant flower, though maybe wilted, already died and dried, but compared to other flowers, this flower is still very fragrant. Similarly, a bhikshu who had violated the vow is still much more supreme than the non-practitioners, than the non-believers and so on. Therefore, such kind of a person should still be worthy of receiving offerings. This is quite reasonable. And then, therefore, I advise those of you never ever to slander the jewel of Sangha. If one were to practice, if one were to habituate oneself with such bad actions or wrong actions, then that kind of karma will become obstacle to stop one from becoming enlightened. Especially would also become a cause for one to destroy Buddha Dharma. There are government officials. You can see their virtuous roots very clearly. There are the ones who had to appear in had to attend certain activities, However, they didn't really enjoy it. And there are the ones who really enjoyed destroying the monasteries and to break the Buddha statues, and they're very good at those. And they would use the excuses of developing economy and so on. In fact, everyone has very different habitual patterns. There are the ones who often talk about, to gossip about the others, and then there are the ones who has there are the ones who would be reborn as kings or emperors. It happened in the history of Tibet, of mainland of India, and so on. The kings, especially under the reign of them, if they were malicious to the Dharma, then under their reign, Dharma would be destroyed, would encounter suppression and destruction during the reign. So people's previous karma is very different. There are the ones who destroy the jewel of Sangha, and maybe if you habituate yourself with this kind of karma and habit, then next lifetime you may very likely to become the Lama in Tibet. 44th, it says that to have this kind of vicious karma in terms of body, speech, and mind would forever eradicate the seeds and merit of being reborn in virtuous realms such as a human and celestial realm, and then there's no hope of being reborn as a human or in celestial realm, but slowly being reborn into the three lower realms. In many kalpas, if one cannot practice to liberation, then they will dwell in the suffering of samsara. There is a sutra called the Sutra on slandering the Buddha, translated by Bodhiruchi, where it talked about some teachers, because of their karma of slandering the Buddha, they don't have any opportunity to practice the Dharma in this lifetime, and even if they do, lots of insights cannot appear. The reason is because they slandered the Dharma before. Many people would say that I studied for many years, but there's no realization, no insights at all. And I think you really needed to then make a confession, because that could be the result of slandering the Dharma, slandering the Buddha, slandering the teacher, and so on. In that sutra, it says that if one sees the teacher being the one who violated precepts, one should not have anger. Even if you see that, person violated the vow, but if you're not the supervisor, if you're not the one who actually is in charge of that, I think it is the best to not speak ill of others in order to guard your own safety for lifetimes. Even if you see it personally, it's not necessary. Whether it's necessary, I think we have to then go back to the Sutra's teaching. The 45th one, then it says that if the pure Sangha, if one generates pure faith to the Sangha, and not slandering the Sangha, but to protect or to have the right mindfulness over their own speech, and not talking ill about the jewel that is the Sangha, the disciple of the Tathagata. In fact, this is a wonderful action. If one were to have faith and fold their hands to supplicate to the Sangha, I think in this way it's really that is considered as a virtuous action. I think we can all make aspirations as such. After listening to this sutra, for whatsoever reason, I will not speak ill of others unless I'm the one in charge, unless I am the supervisor, and so I won't speak ill of others. I would then keep my own speech under my control. If other people talk about others' faults or ill speak of the others, then you should try to change your topic. I think you really need to learn the skill of changing a topic. You can say, oh, I heard something, wait a minute, and then you try to distract someone from such topic. But of course, there are people who are extremely difficult to turn their mind around, and they would come back to the same topic again. So it really depends on people's wisdom. There are people that's very difficult to be guided to the right path. But we need to be very skillful to guide them to generate faith towards the Sangha. We need to be very wise and smart and skillful about it. For example, if someone doesn't have any faith towards the Sangha, but very interested in science, you can say that, I know a scientist in the Sangha. He's ordained, but he used to study so-and-so science. Very good. If someone's very interested in other areas, you can then bring that up. In the precepts, in the Vinaya teachings, it says that Moggallana, Ananda, and the great Kashyapa, they were talking about the sentient beings living in the city. There are people who have faith, and there are people who have wrong views, but they would. But these great venerable ones, they know how to observe them. One of the person they observed at the time had no faith towards Buddha at all, and on top of that, being very stingy, and he was very much afraid of the Shramanas who would come to his door and beg for alms. So he built seven doors to be entered to his house. Therefore, his house is so very much under lockdown. There's no birds can enter his house. One day, when he was eating a pancake, and Ananda suddenly showed up through his miraculous powers, and that person, seeing Ananda standing there with his bowl, couldn't resist him, but to offer a little bit for him. And then later he was eating fish, and then great Kashyapa showed up again with the bowl, and he had to offer some fish, and he felt that he was really upset and started to scold his servant, saying, "Why did you let the Shramanas in?" And the servant said, "No, none of us opened the door." And then that's when he understood. It seems that these practitioners are in fact quite powerful. They have great miraculous powers. That's how he gained faith. And then his wife said, "I heard there was a prince from a country who was born with great wealth, and he had a great wisdom as well. Have you heard of him?" He said, "Yes." And the wife said, "Well, the first one who showed up to beg for alms from you, his name was Ananda, and that was him. He was born with great wealth and great wisdom." He said, "Oh, so it was him." And then the wife asked him, there was a person, his name is Kashyapa. He had lots of wealth, and he has 999 golden plow, and his wife is of the color of gold, really beautiful and very well known. Have you heard of him? And then that person said, "Oh, yes, I have. Have you met him?" And then his wife said, "The person who begged from you and you offered some fish, that was Kashyapa, and they're all within the group of Sangha." And after that, he generated a great faith. So not only we should not slander the Sangha, we should try to generate faith. In this way, we can guide others to generate faith as well. Now, the last stanza, it says, that if one were to slander and scold the Sangha, should swiftly confess. If one were to generate arrogance within the Sangha, one would definitely suffer in future lives and feel regret. So we have to confess before we experience such suffering. Kashyapa, in his previous life, once foul-mouthed monastic, and then during the time of Kashyapa Buddha, there was a person who foul-mouthed a Sangha member, and then that person later was reborn as a person who had nails on his tongue. When in my village there was an old man, he got tongue cancer. His tongue is completely eroded and completely rotten, but he couldn't die. He didn't die, in fact, for a long period of time. For months of times, he had to have a catheter in his mouth, and he suffered gravely. There's no cancer in any other parts of his body, but his tongue completely rotten. Therefore, I really hope that we ourselves can be in harmony with one another. There are people who's very good at arguing with others, fighting every single day with others. This is really not good. We should try to speak of gentle language to one another. There's a great master previously who said that they'd rather lose their tongue but not to slander and make negative karma of slandering others. This is quite important to remember. So even if you created negative karma, you should try to confess by practicing Vajrasattva.
我们自他度就是很有必要忏悔哈。今天讲到这里。所能得以探测这把年，托能你别占那盘旋，今个难解让龙出白，这本错论着啊着。